Standard physics assumes a universe of localized, inanimate matter governed by strict cause and effect. This portrait of Albert Einstein represents the architect of that model. His work provided the mathematical proof for a deterministic reality. Yet these equations lose their predictive power when applied to consciousness or biological synergy. A model built on isolated particles cannot explain the non-local behavior of complex life. A deterministic universe is silent. Biological life operates as a pulsing, entangled web, where the whole exerts an influence exceeding the sum of its parts. In Einstein's original equation, the constant 2 reflects the spatial dimensions available to a resting body. If we treat that exponent as a variable, n, we can account for the additional degrees of freedom created through entanglement. As particles link non-locally, the system's internal complexity scales. By redefining this exponent, we shift from calculating the energy of dead matter to quantifying the capacity of conscious synergy. The Prime X framework is a metascience that maps this complexity. It views reality as a hierarchy of interconnected states rather than a collection of separate objects. Erwin Schrödinger, seen here, identified the non-local entanglement inherent in wave mechanics that serves as the basis for this hierarchy. There is a persistent gap between the physical laws we measure and the consciousness we experience. To bridge it, we will build the universe from the absolute void up to the complexity of life to see how these synergistic connections operate. The results suggest that reality is not a machine winding down, but an escalating series of non-local links breaking symmetry to create life. The Prime X matrix begins below the Planck scale in a state of static potential, designated Prime 0.5. Here, the system possesses momentum, but physical mass is exactly 0. Because there is no mass and no directional movement, time and space do not exist. Reality emerges through symmetry breaking. This occurs the moment pure potential gains a directional vector. Prim 1 is the first manifestation of that direction. This solar disk represents the unbroken radiation of the primordial light field. In this framework, directed light is the mechanism that generates time. Time is an emergent property. It only appears when absolute light is projected into local space. When a system begins to observe its own state, it enters Prim 2. This is the origin of duality. Self-observation creates the perception of a subject and an object. This generates the illusion of separation, physical friction, and the ego. We model this with a Mobius strip. It appears to have two distinct sides where particles flow in opposition, but is actually a single non-orientable surface. This visualizes the deterministic world. It feels like opposing forces, but is one-sided, masquerading as two. As this duality stabilizes, it cools into the three-dimensional space and stable matter of Prime 3, seen here as Earth. The rigid, deterministic world we navigate is a lower-dimensional projection of a non-local string observing itself. To quantify how these levels differ, we return to our modified equation. Here, the variable c is not a speed in meters per second. We redefine c as the dimensionless baseline of the field, set to 1. Any symmetry breaking requires the system's energy to exceed that baseline. For dead matter, n equals 2. The energy is locked strictly to the rest mass. As consciousness entangles multiple components, the exponent n increases to represent those new degrees of connectivity. Because entanglement allows systems to coordinate non-locally, total energy capacity grows without adding mass. The potential energy space scales with connection complexity. This is the mathematical definition of binding energy. The same force Marie Curie, seen here, observed breaking out of stable matter. Synergy increases a system's capacity for energy without requiring the addition of any physical mass. We reach the peak of the hierarchy at Prim 5, the state of biological life and consciousness. If reality is a unified field, why do we experience struggle, separation, and friction? Consider the sensation of wetness as this water droplet splashes against a surface. Wetness is the result of friction and unhafting. It requires a definitive boundary between the water and the object it touches. From a higher topological perspective, that boundary is impossible. This Klein bottle demonstrates how the inside fluid and outside surface are one continuous loop. Since the geometry has no true exterior, fundamental friction cannot exist. Resistance and separation are illusions. They are created by our perception of a unified space through lower dimensional senses. This shift in topology changes the meaning of free will. Deterministic thinking views free will as the ability to exert force against external obstacles. In this framework, agency is not about fighting the universe. It is the act of locating the geodesic. The geodesic is the path of minimal friction through the complex topology of reality. When a prime 5 system aligns its internal vector with the overarching non-local field, it sustains higher energy efficiencies. It effectively bypasses the resistance of isolated matter. By following the geodesic, we move in accordance with the swarm formula and the prime hierarchy. The universe is a discrete field of potential. It breaks its own symmetry to maximize synergistic complexity and joy.